Dr. Priyanka Dr. Priyanka Vinod Bahrani. She is an associate professor at School of Business and Law, Navrachna University, Vadodara. She is a very profound woman and a very renowned name in personality psychology. She is also a certified skill trainer. She has many national and international publications in reputed journal to her name and has also authored in various books. Her research area includes organizational behavior, human resource, industrial psychology, educational psychology, and diverse populations like LGBT community. She is also a part of various assessment centers, skill training centers, and she provides coaching and mentoring to many. To add feathers in her cap, she has been training various professionals in various multinational houses, and her contribution is tremendous. We welcome ma'am, and we are hopeful to learn from you today and have a very experiencing journey. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Agrawal. I'm humbled by such a wonderful introduction you've given to me. And before I start, I must just thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity. And it is really a great pleasure for me also to be the part of this program, which is very close to my heart. Research methodology is one of my dear subjects, which I teach. And other than that, so let's see what I had to prepare and what have I prepared. I hope you all will like it. And I am sure all the participants who are here right now had a nice cup of tea and a nice afternoon nap. बिकॉज आज संडे था तो आराम से सो भी लिए होंगे और चाय भी पी लिया होगा. तो अगर सोने की तैयारी रख रहे हो तो सोना मत, because I am going to ask questions and I would request you to please participate. बिकॉज वैसे भी इस ऑनलाइन के जमाने में ये काले कंप्यूटर को देखने में बहुत मजा नहीं आता, राइट? So do I expect that you all are going to participate, dear participants? Yeah, I take it as yes. आप मन में कुछ भी सोच रहे हो. Yes, thank you. So let me go back to sharing my window. I hope the screen is visible to everyone.
Yes, ma'am, it's visible.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is a topic that I was supposed to talk about, that is longitudinal cross-sectional design. So I'll just quickly brief you about कि मैंने पहली बार इसको कब सुना था. So my research was in personality psychology, and I was studying on personality types in Enneagram. And while I was teaching, while I was trying to understand which research methodology to use in my subject, which was more organizational in nature, because I did on leadership and other things. So mine was more or less a group understanding. So I never thought of कि एक बंदे को लेकर के भी हम पढ़ाई कर सकते हैं. It was that time when one of my very close friend was diagnosed with cancer, and way back in 95, 96, cancer was not as common word as it is today. So she was going through a lot of trauma and she was going through a lot of health hazards and everything. So तब वो मुझे बोली कि प्रियंका चलो ना एक मेरे coping mechanism पे research paper लिखते हैं. पागल हो गई क्या यार, तू क्या बातें कर रही है? I was shocked. मैंने कहा you're fighting for your life and you are going through chemo and you're talking about कि हम research paper लिखते हैं. बोली but I want to share experience and I want it to be documented and let it be published. So that was the first incident of my life where I did a case study on one individual, and where I had used interview as a method and her family members to talk about it. Just a minute.
Another before answer.
Yeah, sorry. So in that case, so that was the first time when I did a case study, and the treatment was a little longer. So we could not do much. 2 साल तक हमने उस study को किया कि कहाँ से शुरुआत हुआ था, how she went on, how her family held, how family became a big support. She was not married to her parents, her elder sister, her younger sister, her elder brother, how they became a good support for her to work on that. And so we developed a case study, which was later published. And we first presented in one of the conference, and then we published. Of course, she went fine. She's good now. She's now working in Australia. So God has been kind enough to help her go through that. But that was my first experience of a case study. And I call it as longitudinal क्योंकि 3 साल हमने एक ही study पे काम किया, थोड़ा in depth जाकर के. So that was how I wanted to introduce this concept, and that is where I learned about the longitudinal. तब जाकर के मैंने research methods की book खोली, and I read that okay, there can be a single case design, there can be longitudinal study. These are all things we need to take care of. These things can be a bias and whatnot. So continuing with that, starting with that basic introduction, हम आगे बात करते हैं. So as we discussed that this particular this thing is on session is on single subject design, wherein we are trying to understand and talk about the oh, what is that? Sorry, I don't know what happened. Yeah, so this is one thing that single subject design is all about, trying to study a subject, trying to study one individual and understand the nuances, in-depth understanding of that one particular subject. And this particular design is very famous in developmental psychology and of course in health psychology, because initially people said that the case study cannot be a very, very scientific method, because it is not, there is no particular database where we can validate the findings, which in group we can do it, and we may not be able to utilize any higher statistics. So based on that, initially people were very reluctant on this, but now people have been able to take that as one of the very, very effective methods for research. So longitudinal research, I'll start with that. Longitudinal research, as the name indicates, is long in nature. So long in nature means that it has to be, just a minute. Kya hua, mummy? Yeah, I'm sorry. Actually, my mother-in-law was a little not well, so I'm sorry for that. Yeah, I think annotate शायद आपको stop करने पड़ेंगे सबके मैम, because there are students who might not be knowing and they are making some kind of marks on the screen. So आपको शायद disable करना पड़ेगा मैम. Yeah. So anyways, as I was talking about the longitudinal research, so it is, as the name indicates, longitudinal. So it can be studied for a longer duration of time, and it is mostly used in the developmental psychology and the health psychology researches. It is used. So I posted this particular picture because I just wanted to make you understand through a metaphor that it can go on from the time of birth to the old age of an individual. And initially developmental psychology research have started with that, where the individual started studying his own child for that from there, because it was one of the first hand information individual could get. So let us understand what is longitudinal study. So longitudinal study basically means that it should have the same subject to see what are the changes that may occur over a period of time. So वो शायद 2 महीने की हो सकती है, 6 महीने की हो सकती है, 1 साल की हो सकती है, 10 साल की हो सकती है. So depending upon the variables, depending upon the design of the study, depending upon how and what changes we want to observe in an individual, we may identify that. And this period may be as small as few weeks, or it may be as long as maybe 9 decades or 10 decades. So this is more of an observational research where the researcher identifies, observe, and notes down. Right. And this is a type of observational research. And the beauty in this is that the researcher need not interfere with the subject. So he or she is just an observant, and he or she is supposed to be just noting down what is happening. So it does not interferes in the process of development. The person is just an observer. So since the research extends beyond a single moment in time, so these developments, or the researcher has to identify कि हमको किस चीज को स्टडी करना है. Variables बहुत clear होने चाहिए पहले से. And most of the times we may do it on a targeted population. It can be on an individual, or it can be few individuals that we want to study, and at both group and individual level. And we also should study what is the sequence of events that are following. So as I said that within psychology, the developmental psychologists make the greatest use of these longitudinal research, क्योंकि उससे हमें पता चलता है कि कैसे छोटे छोटे चेंजेस डेवलप होते हैं. फॉर एग्जांपल पियाजे का जो कॉग्निटिव डेवलपमेंट का थियरी था, we have moral development theory. So all these theories have been studied on few individuals for a little longer period of time, and then they have come to this kind of conclusion. And they also want to understand what is the nature and causes of these changes. So हम साथ साथ environment का भी study कर सकते हैं. I hope I am making sense to everyone.
Definitely, ma'am.
Yeah. I just thought कि before I continue, I should just know that we all are on the same page. Yeah, thank you. So there are 3 types of longitudinal research when we talk about. One is panel study, another is cohort study, and third is retrospective study. So this one, panel study is also called as trend study, and trend studies are very, very commonly used now. Now, especially, it has become a lot of trend because we want to study what is the trends that are going on. And based on that, the latest researches in terms of the, suppose if, because I'm working into the area of OB, so we also see that how these studies are also impacting marketing behavior, consumer behavior. So trend study is basically where the longitudinal research that is the investigator samples down randomly some defined population over a period of time, and different individuals constituting each sample. And one example of trend study is that in late adolescence, why there is lot of suicidal thoughts in the minds of the people. So we want to study the trend. What has been the change? How the parenting behavior has changed? What has been the academic pressure on the individual? What has been the other things that has been impacting the individual, that there are a lot of suicidal ideation in the minds. Pehle wo ideation ke saath saath, for example, why there is lot of suicides happening in the college campuses. So for example, in one of the researches, there has been another trend that is seen that engineering colleges face lot of suicides. So that was another trend study that has been happening, and people have tried to understand that what has been in the past, what has been in the present, what are the factors that are leading to these kinds of things. Second is cohort studies. So cohort study is where the researchers study a specific well-defined population over time. So वो 6 लोगों को लिया, उन्हीं 6 लोगों को थोड़ा लंबे समय तक पढ़ा. But sample different people at each data collection point. For example, we may identify a few people, we study them for some time, then we select other set of people, we study them for some time. So an investigator samples randomly from the population because of a specific characteristics, for example, age. One of the very famous cohort study is related to nurses, health study, which began in 1976. And it involved 122,000 nurses from the original cohort, followed by new generation nurses in 1989. So this is one of the very well-known researches done in Longitudinal. So here, the project began to know that to study the long-term effects of using oral contraceptives every 2 years. And the members receive a survey with questions about health-related topics. And at the request of participants, the investigators began adding questions on the variety of topics like smoking, nutrition, quality of life. So not only the methods of oral contraceptives or what are the effects of oral contraceptive, but they also try to understand how along with oral contraceptives, if the people have been smoking, if the people have been having nutrition, or what are the quality of life issues they are having. So these kind of studies are supposed to be cohort studies. So let us go to the third, that is panel studies that I was talking of. In this design, the same participants are followed throughout the course of studies, as I mentioned. Like इसका एक बहुत positive psychology का एक बहुत interesting research मुझे याद आया. In that case, this is a very famous nun study, if you have ever heard of, if anyone has studied that. So in study, what they did is they picked up around 54 nuns from a convent, and these 54 nuns were studied from the day when they took the oath to be a nun to the time when they turned towards 70. So the study went on for around 30 years, and they were supposed to write down what is their feeling, how do they feel. So it was just the written content that was assessed. And towards the end, when only 11 nuns were surviving, 11 or 13 nuns were surviving, and they became the subject of research. And that study was basically to know that how the state of mind, if it is positive, how it leads to higher satisfaction at workplace, plus they live a longer duration of life. So very interesting research. If someone has studied positive psychology, they will be able to deal with it. They'll know it, I mean. So in this design, the same participants are followed throughout the course of study. So the most famous study of people throughout their lifespan was initiated by, so this is another study by Louis Terman in 1920s. And when he began, he did not suspect that it would become such a lifelong enterprise for him. And his successors has kept it alive to 9th decade. यानी जो लुई टर्मन ने स्टडी शुरू किया था 1920s में, वो 90 साल तक चली है. So 9th decade means around 90 years. So it has continued for a very long period of time. So do we have any questions here? Do you think ऐसा हो सकता है, possible है, नहीं है? किसी के मन में कोई सवाल?
Good evening, ma'am.
Yes, good evening.
Ma'am, I wanted to know what would be the disadvantages of cohort studies.
Yeah, we will talk about it. I have the list. Okay, and so sure. The biggest disadvantage is attrition. People will leave and go. राइट. डेवलपमेंटल साइकोलॉजी में बहुत सारा ऐसा स्टडी है जहाँ पे 15 लोग लिए हैं, आखिरी में 3 ही लोग बचे हैं. Forget about long-term studies. One of my dissertation student, she was doing a research on giving intervention to children with learning disability. 1.5 साल का इंटरवेंशन था. MA फर्स्ट ईयर से शुरू किया था कि बाय द टाइम MA2 खत्म होगा, MA2 के 1 साल तक she will be able to do that. And when she started, she had 7 students who were diagnosed with LD, and they agreed, parents agreed to bring them for intervention. So to start with, it was a very good number. 7 लोगों का था. हफ्ते में 3 बार उन स्टूडेंट्स को सेशन देना था फॉर सम 15 वीक्स. 15 नहीं, शायद ज्यादा थे, 20 वीक्स. नाउ अ वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग थिंग हैपेंड. This all started before the testing was done and they were diagnosed for LD. So 7 parents, mother and father, both agreed to that because the children were young. So we had to follow the ethics and they agreed to that. By 1.5 years, by 1 year, the number of participants, so around 20 weeks ka tha wo. So by first month, we dropped 1. So the student came to me कि मैम ऐसा हुआ है. मैंने कहा नहीं चलता है, 7 की जगह 6 होगा, चलेगा. We will start with that. You won't believe, by the time it was the 2nd year, July, we were left only with 4. And final data के लिए total 3 लोग ही बचे. So it was so difficult to convince the panel members that we started with 7 because we cannot go back in time and get them back. We can't do anything. It was very difficult. But then it was taken as a single type of case study. So we, instead of presenting 7, we presented only 3 intervention studies. But what you asked a very right question कि इसमें क्या problem हो सकता है? ये बहुत बड़ा problem हो सकता है. So coming to the pros of longitudinal study, how it is good and how it is nice. As I mentioned that yes, please.
Ma'am, as you said in longitudinal studies, ma'am, as you have given the example of intervention, you have taken 7 participants.
Yes.
Ma'am, what happened in that case in which we are studying a single participant and some due to some in extreme circumstances? So ma'am, how it will be like if we are studying a single participant? So to compensate that, it is not possible.
No.
So ma'am, in that case, what
you will have to drop down the research. No, you will have to drop down the research, or you will have to do उतना ही publication जहां तक आपने उसको study किया है. You have no other choice. So that is why generally, to be very honest, the best thing is be precautious. Don't be too optimistic. कि मैंने 3 लोगों को लिया है, 3 लोग चलेंगे ही चलेंगे 2 साल तक, 5 साल तक. आपको अगर एंड में 3 लोगों का चाहिए तो 12 लोगों से चालू करो. So I'm just giving an example that this is what we always keep, that buffer. So in my case, in my students' case, we made that error. हमको लगा कि 7 लोग हैं, 7 लोगों में से एक आधा ड्रॉप भी हो जाएगा तो भी 6 तो रहेंगे हमारे पास. We never knew कि 7 का we'll be left with only 3 people. So it is always very good to have those precautionary measures with us because we are dealing with human beings. We are not dealing with piece of furniture. Animals के साथ भी वो precautions लेते हैं. अब तो allowed नहीं है बहुत studies. तो animals के साथ भी होता है कि just in case the animal dies. So what do we do with that? Or even with a human being, it can happen. Anything can happen. So I'm sure COVID में जितने लोगों भी अगर रहे होंगे and if they have passed away during the COVID times, they would have been out of the research. Have I answered your question, dear?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah. I'll move on. So the pros of longitudinal studies are because it is done in a very long way. We have studied the individual for a very long period of time. We have observed every element of the behavior. We have tried to understand most of the things. So whatever result findings we will have are very, very authentic. So it provides unique insights which otherwise may not be possible. अगर आप 50 लोगों का डेटा कलेक्ट कर रहे हैं तो इंडिविजुअल को क्या असर हो रहा है, that you will never get to know. Second is useful in observing the phenomena related to development and lifespan. For example, when we say कि 13 months में बच्चा चलना सीखता है. Now, if you have a case wherein you have studied the case and the child has not started walking till the month of 13, maybe it started walking at the age of 15 months. Similarly, you observed another child who started walking at the age of 11 months, someone who started walking at 12 months. So you can have some kind of this thing that the child can start walking from the age of 11 months to 13 months maybe. Helps to establish the sequence of events. इसके बाद ये होगा, इसके बाद ये होगा, इसके बाद ये होगा. इसीलिए डेवलपमेंटल साइकोलॉजी में जब आप माइलस्टोन्स पढ़ते हैं, I'm taking that liberty to understand that most of the people are from psychology. So in that case, so when we study these milestones, at 2 months child will give the smile, at 6 months the child will sit with support, child will turn at 5 months. So how have we come to this sequence of events? Because it has been longitudinally observed about an individual. And इसका मैं अगर थोड़ा सा side track होके बात करूं, that if at all somebody has studied industrial psychology, so when we maintain HRIS, Human Resource Information System, of the employee in the companies, there from the day individual has applied to the company till the time individual has exit from the company, everything is being observed and kept the record for, to know that what is the progression of the employee in our company. So organizational study में उसको थोड़ा अलग तरीके से पढ़ा जाता है, because they want to understand the life of employee in the organization. So it is not actually a study in research, but the similar kind of thing also happens in the organizations. So it can help to establish the sequence of events and can also be done with few participants. क्योंकि ज़्यादा participants के साथ longitudinal study becomes very, very difficult. So the cons of longitudinal studies, which will include all the 3 types. One is it tends to be expensive because you are studying in detail about everything. Right? आप उनको बहुत detail में पढ़ते हैं. Second है time consuming. So expensive भी है, time consuming भी है. Plus, as I mentioned, attrition rate, loss of subjects, death of the individual, transfer of the individual, did not agree to be the part of that, because according to ethics, when they sign this thing that they are going to be the part of our research, they have the freedom to drop the research at any point in time. I remember my student came back and told me कि हम उन्होंने तो हमको साइन करके दिया है, हम तो उनको फोर्स कर सकते हैं, क्या पैसे कैसे छोड़ सकते हो? मैंने कहा बट एथिक्स के हिसाब से आप ऐसा कुछ नहीं कर सकते. According to ethical standards, if person has agreed to be the part of your research, does not mean that he has signed a contract with you. It simply means he has agreed to be the part of your research, but may drop in at any point in time. So even in researches, you would have, I'm sure you would have studied that. In ethics, we tell that when we take that understanding from the subject, we tell them that you can drop at any point in time. Nobody, you're not abided by that. Now, what are the issues, as I mentioned, that what are the different issues in these? Yes, Ananya, you have some question?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, I wanted to ask, since we can't ethically stop a participant from staying for a longitudinal research, and since it is all on them to not stay for a research, then is there any alternative method? Like if we want to study longitudinal method, it is defeating the purpose altogether. Then why will I choose longitudinal study?
So you may not choose, but suppose if the variable that you want to study or the objective of your research demands longitudinal research, then you cannot choose a short-term research. You cannot choose cross-sectional research. Right. Like if you want to see what is the development pattern of a child, does this child, suppose if the child is, this has happened, that if a mother has delivered a special child, and at 2 years he is identified as Down syndrome child. Now mother being a psychologist want to study in detail about the child. अब इस केस में उस, now in this case it is the mother only, sorry, but if I am talking about some other research wherein I want to study in detail about the development pattern of the individual, then in that case I don't have any other choice. Like I gave you the example, the intervention studies, that I have to give intervention for 20 weeks. It is a long-term research. It is a longitudinal study. I want to see what are the behavioral changes. So we did what are the differences in the learning difficulty, how the child has improved in the phonics, how the child has improved in the expression, how the child has improved in the arithmetic. मेरे वो पांचों areas हैं जिन पे मैं research, जिसपे मैं I am giving this intervention. So I have no other choice but to decide on the longitudinal research. But
अगर there is no altogether alternative for say, मतलब if I don't want to, I want to do a long-term study, and still longitudinal has so many drawbacks. Is there no alternative altogether?
So then change the subject.
Right.
अगर समय का demand आपका subject है, तो then the purpose is defeated, no?
Yes, ma'am.
अगर मेरा intervention तो मैं long term ही करूँगी ना.
Right, ma'am. Okay, I get that.
तो मुझे या तो अपना टॉपिक सब्जेक्ट चेंज करना पड़ेगा, या तो मेथड अगर चेंज कर सकती हूँ, कुछ और थोड़ा सा ट्विस्ट करके कुछ और ऐड कर दूं. क्योंकि लॉन्गिट्यूडनल मेथड के जो डिसएडवांटेजेस है वो तो रहने ही वाले. एक्सपेंसिव भी होता है, टाइम कंज्यूमिंग भी होता है, ड्रॉपिंग ऑफ द सब्जेक्ट, ये तीनों मैंने खुद फेस किए हैं जो मैं आपको बता रही हूँ. सो जबकि मेरा तो छोटा सा था, 1.5 साल का, 1 साल का.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah. So I hope I answered your question in a satisfying manner. Yeah. So coming to what are the issues in these longitudinal? अब ये issues जो मैंने आपको बताए उससे भी बड़े issues हैं थोड़े से. एक है retrospective study. Now, number of times when you're doing longitudinal study, like I gave you the example of my friend. So when I was asking her that how did you feel when you were diagnosed and told about that you have cancer. So she gave me this is what I felt. अब 6 महीने पहले जो actual feeling थी और जो वो मुझे अभी बता रही थी, वो डिट्टो तो नहीं हो सकती है. So that is what is the disadvantage number of times. That if you're doing a retrospective study where you want to see the changes period over time, now, if the individual is not asked there and then, if the individual is asked to retrospectively tell you, then there have been researchers in experimental psychology in memory which say that there are always lapses in memory. Eyewitness effect, I'm sure, eyewitness testimony, sabne padha hoga. So whatever you remember, number of times you don't know that this has happened, and you may tend to not know. आपको लगेगा ये ऐसा हुआ था, पर जरूरी नहीं है वैसा हुआ. बट आपके पास और कोई चॉइस नहीं है but to rely on the information that is coming to you through retrospection. Second is prospective researches. So in this approach, the changes, in an approach to study the change over time that identifies the research participants at the beginning of the project who are followed throughout the course of research. So prospective study में उतने ज़्यादा problems कम होते हैं because you are present with them and you are going to study the changes over time. अब यहाँ पे एक limitation हो सकता है that if as a researcher myself I'm doing that, am I able to deal with it effectively? Am I trained enough to pursue that? Do I have the art of observing everything that is the part of research? So ऐसा मान के चलते हैं कि अगर आपने कोई भी research आप कर रहे हैं तो you're trained in research, right? And attrition we have already talked about, that there is loss of subjects. People may move out from the city, from the job, or the loss of subject because of anything. So what are few things? What are the few precautions that we take so that we do not, so we do not so we are able to continue with our research. So one is preparation and another is persistence. ठीक है. So preparation के लिए क्या सबसे ज्यादा जरूरी है? That you know the dates of the birth of the people and you should know the full names of the people, so that अगर आगे जाकर के आपसे, suppose if it is a school में आप research कर रहे हैं, तो स्कूल के स्टूडेंट्स का डेटा आपके पास हो. And identifying a contact person who lived at different addresses. So if the person has been living at different places, you will have to check that, can I get the contact number of the person whom we can approach in case we are not able to approach you. And maintaining the contact throughout the project, like wishing them birthdays or regular newsletters or happy Diwali, happy new year, whatever, because आपका research अभी भी चालू है. So basic interpersonal relationship skill आपको use करनी है. Second is persistence. So persistence is beginning a trace of a person as soon contact is lost. अगर वो बंदा छोड़ के चला गया है कहीं बार, हाँ, if the person has told you that I am going out of station and I can't be the part of your research anymore, or I consciously want to drop out of this research, then the question is different. But you have to start tracing an individual the moment you feel that you've lost. Like in my student's case, as I told you, in her case, parents stopped coming. Thankfully, she knew the addresses because testing के लिए उन्होंने घर पे बुलाया था. So she went to their homes, convinced them to continue. So one or two continued, the rest of them said no. So making multiple phone calls to set up appointments for interviews so that you don't lose out on data. Showing willingness to conduct the interviews at times and locations convenient for the respondent. As I told you, कितनी बार ऐसा होता था कि वो मना कर देते थे कि हम यूनिवर्सिटी में तो नहीं आएंगे, हमारे पास ना इतना पैसा है, ना हमारे पास इतना टाइम है. So then my student, and because it becomes a little risky as a student that you are going to different people's homes to collect data, वो भी बहुत आसान नहीं होता है, risk factor उसमें भी रहता है. So then when my student said that वो लोग parents कह रहे हैं घर पे आके intervention, so I told her that this responsibility and risk you will have to decide that do you want to take that risk, do you want to go to their homes. She said, madam, research तो करना है ना. मैंने कहा अगर तुम confident enough हो तो तुम जाओ. तो बेचारी she will go with what chili spray and knife in her bag and what not. But though there was no risk in, मतलब actually कोई risk नहीं था. But जब लड़कियां होती हैं तो हम थोड़ा सा उस मामले में, and going to the unknown people's homes. So when they're coming to the university, it is very safe. They are in the public environment. But going to somebody's home, घर में कौन कौन है, क्या करता है, कौन कौन रहता है, ये थोड़ा सा risky हो जाता है. So these are few things. So initially, two times she went with a friend. कि एटलीस्ट मेरे साथ एक जना और होगा. एंड देन व्हेन शी आइडेंटिफाइड कि घर का एनवायरनमेंट सेफ है, कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है, देन शी स्टार्टेड गोइंग अलोन, क्योंकि वो लोग शाम को 6 बजे के बाद का टाइम देते थे. तो कई बार स्टूडेंट्स के लिए थोड़ा सा डिफिकल्ट हो जाता है. प्रोवाइडिंग इंसेंटिव्स टू ऑफसेट द इनकन्वीनियंस ऑफ पार्टिसिपेशन. हाँ भाई, अब ये तो अलग बात है बजट की, कि अगर आपके पास बजट है या किसी प्रकार के आप इंसेंटिव्स दे सकते हैं उनको टू कंटिन्यू to the path of research. For example, the student gave the incentive कि अगर आपके बच्चे में डिफरेंस आया तो मेरे रिसर्च के बाद भी 20 हफ्तों के बाद भी मैं आपके बच्चे का 1 साल तक I will continue your intervention if you want. So she offered some this. But कई रिसर्चेस में हमारे पास बजट होता है, कुछ फाइनेंशियल इंप्लीकेशंस होते हैं, तो दैट कैन बी गिवन. सो एनी क्वेश्चंस इन लॉन्गिट्यूडिनल रिसर्च? शुड आई मूव ऑन टू क्रॉस सेक्शनल? हैव आई बीन वेरी फास्ट स्टूडेंट्स? Participants, sorry. Anyone can unmute and say, please. हाँ, बोलिए मैम.
One question is there for Ananya.
Yes, Ananya.
Is it ethical thought?
Yes, ma'am. I wanted to ask, when you were talking about the convincing bit.
Yes.
Ma'am, is
Yes.
it ethical to visit people and convince them for your study, considering?
Yes.
I mean, it is solely their prerogative.
Yes. Yes, it is, because you're not forcing them, you're convincing them. आप धमका नहीं रहे उनको.
जी मैम, ठीक है.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Shiksha is there. Yes.
जी.
Good evening, ma'am.
Yes,
Ma'am,
Shiksha.
I wanted to ask that why will someone do this kind of study? What are the situations in which no other type of study is possible and we have to go for a longitudinal study?
I think I answered this question when I was talking about in the previous question, that number of times the demand of the research is indicating कि longitudinal ही चाहिए क्योंकि हमको step by step progression देखना है. So we cannot do it number of times through cross sectional. So we want, उसका option है हमारे पास cross sectional, हम वो भी पढ़ेंगे. लेकिन the advantage is that we are studying the same individual over a period of time. So the results that we get are more authentic, relatable, and validated, because the same individual, you have seen that changes along. For example, if I want to see the impact of, suppose if I want to see that how is the development pattern during adolescence, development of aggression or frustration during adolescence. So मैं पहले 10 से 11 साल के बच्चों को देखा मैंने, फिर 12 से 14 साल के बच्चों को देखा, फिर मैंने 15 से 17 साल के बच्चों को देखा. Now in this case, every section is a different group. So the group who is 13 to 15, उस group में what is the family circumstances, what is the socio-economic status, what is the state of mind, what is the marital discord amongst the parents, how is the school, there are so many factors. But in longitudinal study on the same subject, ये सारे external factors same रहने वाले. इनके केस में 15 लोगों के 15 environment है, but फिर भी आप generalized result ला रहे. Have I answered your question, Shiksha?
Yes, ma'am. And ma'am, I also wanted to ask that how does this study claim to be scientific? Like, is it reliable and valid, and
Yes,
is it
yes.
systematic?
Yes, yes, that is where I was coming to. So this is one question. Initially, as I said, that when even the observation method has number of questions that has come to its validity and scientificity. That this is not a scientific method. एक ज़माने में उसको scientific method गिना ही नहीं जाता था. But later on, it was realized that observation, if it is a scientific observation, if the individual who is observing is training in observation objectively and has validated the results with verbatims, then it is supposed to be a scientific study. इसीलिए I'm sure आप लोग का qualitative research पे कुछ session हुआ होगा. So qualitative research की जब भी हम बात करते हैं, dialogues, people, that words they said, they all become the source of validation. So definitely it is a valid study. It is a valid method and the scientific method. Because developmental psychology तो उसी पे based है. Right? Did I answer, Shiksha?
Shiksha,
Yes,
unmute yourself.
Yeah,
Ma'am, Shrija. Yes.
Shrija.
was
Okay,
there,
okay.
yes.
Actually, there was raising of the hand, so I thought Shiksha is
Yes,
asking. Sorry.
Shiksha is there. Shiksha,
Yeah, yeah.
unmute yourself beta and ask your question. Yes.
मैम, जब कभी हम मतलब सिंगल पर्सन पे स्टडी कर रहे हैं तो मतलब इसको जनरलाइज कैसे कर सकते हैं?
हाँ. अब आई जनरलाइजेशन का सवाल. अब जनरलाइजेशन करना साइकोलॉजी में एंड क्वालिटेटिव स्टडीज में जरूरी नहीं है. हर रिसर्च जनरलाइजेशन के लिए नहीं की जाती है. ठीक है. जब आप हेल्थ साइकोलॉजी पढ़ते हैं, जब आप डेवलपमेंटल साइकोलॉजी पढ़ते हैं, हर चीज जनरलाइज नहीं की जा सकती. सो कई बार इंडिविजुअल केस स्टडीज इन इटसेल्फ. ओके, सो लेट मी फर्स्ट अंडरस्टैंड. आई एम श्योर बाय नाउ यू आर थरो अबाउट व्हाट इज रिसर्च, राइट? व्हाट इज रिसर्च? मुश्किल सवाल हो गया.
Quickly answer, yes.
Don't worry, I'm not going to judge you. Yeah. Sorry, any one of you, I can hear two voices. I'm sorry.
It is a scientific investigation.
Ma'am,
scientific investigation to.
Ma'am, it's a scientific investigation to find relationships within variables in these in the environment, or to basically to search to search anything which has already been searched upon, but there's a gap.
To search anything, to add on to the body of knowledge, right? The last statement is very important.
In a systematic manner.
Yes. So whatever, it's a systematic study, the relationship between variables to add on to the body of knowledge, right? So psychology के body of knowledge के लिए अगर मेरा एक individual research कहीं पे ऐड कर रहा है, सो वो अपने आप ही साइंटिफिक है. सो जनरलाइजेशन जरूरी नहीं है. वो अगर ऐसा जनरलाइजेशन का बहुत ज्यादा बात होता तो क्वालिटेटिव रिसर्चेस कभी आती ही नहीं. ठीक है, आगे चलो. अनुप्रिया, एनी क्वेश्चन? अनुप्रिया?
यस मैम.
बेटा पूछिए, ask your question, अनुप्रिया.
मैम मुझे पूछना था कि लाइक जैसे अगर हमें सिर्फ 7 सब्जेक्ट्स के ही चाहिए रिस्पॉन्स, तो क्या हम उसके अकॉर्डिंग सैंपल साइज ज्यादा कर सकते हैं?
Sorry, actually my mother-in-law is little unwell, तो मैं थोड़ा अटक गई उसमें. Sorry. Yeah. So Anupriya, sorry, I missed your question. Can you just repeat?
Yes मैम. मैम मैं पूछ रही थी कि जैसे अगर हमें सिर्फ 7 सब्जेक्ट्स के ही चाहिए रिस्पॉन्स, तो हम उसके अकॉर्डिंग सैंपल साइज को अगर ज्यादा रखेंगे तो फिर हम उतने लोगों का रिस्पॉन्स ले सकते हैं. तो लिमिटेशन तो इसके लिए नहीं होंगे ना?
नहीं है, नहीं है. वही तो बोला मैंने आपको कि अगर आपको पता है आपको मिनिमम 7 तो एंड में चाहिए, तो आप 10 लेके चल सकते हैं. उनमें से अगर 2-3 ड्रॉप आउट हुए भी तो आपका फाइनल नंबर 7 तो मेंटेन रहेगा ही. जैसे हम क्वांटिटेटिव रिसर्चेस में करते हैं कि अगर हमको 350 डेटा चाहिए तो हम 500 लोगों से मांगते हैं डेटा, और एटलीस्ट 350 तो हमको ऑथेंटिक रिसर्च डेटा मिल ही जाता है. क्वांटिटेटिव की मैं बात करी. सिमिलरली क्वालिटेटिव आल्सो वी डू द सेम, सो दैट वी डोंट मिस आउट ऑन द our research which is going to be very very effective. But एक interesting बात ये भी है कि अगर बीच में ड्रॉप आउट हो भी जाते हैं तो वो जो रिसर्च, if the research has been halfway, so अगर वो halfway भी रिसर्च हुआ है तो that is also a very important data that can be also utilized somewhere. One thing which I have studied or which I have realized in my experience of research is that कोई भी information वेस्ट नहीं जाता. आप उस डेटा को जरूर इस्तेमाल कर सकते हैं कहीं ना कहीं. सो यू शुड ओनली डेवलप दैट एटीट्यूड ऑफ कीपिंग दैट डेटा एंड यूटिलाइजिंग दैट डेटा वेयर एवर नीडेड. सो डोंट थिंक कि एक भी डेटा वेस्ट है, कभी मत सोचना ऐसा. या हैव आई आंसर्ड मिस दुबे?
यस मैम.
आगे चलूं मैं?
यस.
या, थैंक यू. ओके, so coming to cross-sectional research now, which is opposite of longitudinal study. So cross-sectional research is a design in which investigator studies the groups in different characteristics at the same amount of time, at the same time, in contrast to longitudinal approach that studies the same individual over time. Like cross-sectional study, as I gave you the example, that if I want to study the attitude of people of adolescent towards suicide, now in that case I study 9 10 pre-adolescent 10 years, 11 years से लेकर के 13 साल तक, 14 साल से लेके 16 साल तक, 16 साल से लेके 18 साल तक. So I study what is their attitude and then tell that 11 to 13 years of age, children have this kind of attitude. In 14 to 16 have this attitude, 17 to 18 have this attitude. So with that, I will come to lot of interesting information without wasting time. So there another choice is I study these 5 adolescents. जब वो 11 साल से लेकर के 18 साल तक बड़े हो रहे हैं, तब मैं उनका attitude देखूं किसी एक चीज की तरह, suppose स्कूल की तरह. So एक choice है longitudinal study, 11 साल से लेके 18 साल. Another choice is from I take different age groups, different sections of society, or different genders and study them. I hope this is clear what is cross-sectional study. So this is a kind of observation study in which a researcher collects data from different individuals, and researchers can use these studies to analyze characteristics such as income, gender, age. They give a glimpse into the prevailing characteristics in a population and can provide information about what is currently happening in the population. Therefore, these studies gives us a snapshot of a population or society at a specific moment in time. So for example, if I want to study how the demonetization had an impact on the emotional front of the business class, suppose if I want to study that. So in that case, I will identify the business sections, manufacturing, service, marketing. Based on that, I will also get into within details of people who have small and medium scale enterprise, higher big enterprises, multinationals. मैं सब में difference देखती हूँ, तो मुझे trend पता चल जाएगा. But मैं एक ही समय में सभी के ऊपर study कर सकती हूँ. So pros of cross-sectional studies. Because a lot of data can be collected very fast. So it allows researchers to gather information very quickly. It does not take much time, and multiple variables can be observed at once. Because मेरे पास एक section है, उसमें मैं 8 variables को उसी समय में 15 दिन के अंदर, 1 महीने के अंदर वो study खत्म करके रख सकती हूँ. Multiple variables can be observed and it becomes a support for the future studies. The cons or the disadvantages of cross-sectional are we cannot see the cause and effect relationship क्योंकि हम same लोगों को नहीं observe कर रहे हैं. So जो हम longitudinal में cause and effect पता लगा सकते थे, यहाँ पे we cannot find out cause and effect because we are studying different groups with different sizes. Cannot observe development over a period of time. So एक साल के अंदर कितना difference आया, 6 महीने के अंदर कितना difference आया, 1 महीने के अंदर कितना difference आया. I cannot observe the same individual. So any questions in cross-sectional studies? Then I go to the difference. Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
So ma'am, since we cannot observe the further development, so there would be biases in the study?
In cross-sectional?
Yes, ma'am.
No, it cannot be. Because here again, ulta biases nahi hote hain. Because you are coming in contact with the individual for a very short period of time. Jo now again, because you asked the question, it is clicking to me that longitudinal में वो थोड़ा सा personal bias आ सकता है, क्योंकि आप उन्हीं बंदों के साथ 6 महीने तक एक साथ आप अटैच हो सकते हैं.
Yes, ma'am.
लेकिन क्रॉस सेक्शनल में पॉसिबल नहीं है. इसीलिए one thing that we speak in research over and over again is training, training and training. Why you are undergoing this training in research? Because this training in research will help you lead to objective mindset. So training to to not to be subjective is what is very important. But cross sectional studies में subjectivity या biases के chances बहुत ही nil होते हैं, मतलब nil ही होते हैं, because you're not coming in contact much with the subjects.
Okay, got it. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah. So I just saw one question in the chat box by Anshu, that Anshu Priya, that in intervention example, when only 3 subjects with LD were available, when the outcome was generalized to entire 7 subjects, no, it was not. It was presented as 3 single case studies.
Ma'am, I have a doubt.
Yes, please ask.
मैम जैसे कि लॉन्गिट्यूडनल स्टडीज में अगर कोई मतलब जो पार्टिसिपेंट है, अगर मैंने 10 पार्टिसिपेंट्स को लिया स्टडी करने के लिए, उनके 7 या 8 साल के एज में उनको ये ADHD हो सकता है उस टाइम पे,
करेक्ट,
वो फिर ADHD या फिर लर्निंग डिसेबिलिटी ये ऐसा कुछ ये है, तो वो फिर आगे जाके वो लोग जब 15 इयर्स के एज के होंगे तो उनका वो मे बी हम लोग को चेक करना कि इधर इट बिकम सीवियर और नॉट, एज देयर एनी इम्प्रूवमेंट इन देम। लॉन्गिट्यूडनल में ये चीज हो सकती है, बट मैम क्रॉस सेक्शनल में अगर वही सेम केस हम लोग ले रहे हैं 7 से 8 साल के बच्चों में कि उन लोग को लर्निंग डिसेबिलिटी है या नहीं, तो फिर नेक्स्ट जब हम लोग पार्टिसिपेंट्स लेंगे और फिर 15 to 16 इयर्स के एज के लिए, तो उन लोग का फिर वो सीवियरिटी हम लोग को कैसे पता चलेगा, मतलब कैसे टेस्ट
नहीं
करेंगे?
पता चलेगा, वो लॉन्गिट्यूडनल से ही होता है। सिर्फ इतना डिफरेंस आता है जो हम अभी when we study these researches, we only get to know that if the people are given interventions, if the children are given intervention, systematic intervention, then only there will be improvement. So this has come as a result of longitudinal researches. Cross sectional researches में हम ये नहीं बोल सकते हैं कि जिन बच्चों को ADHD था 15 साल में ADHD चला गया या ज्यादा हो गया या कम हो गया. We cannot say that. We can never come to that conclusion. फिर उसमें, as I mentioned, that decision of cross-sectional study or longitudinal study depends upon what is the objective of research.
Okay,
have I answered your question, Shatabdi?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, I have another question that in between longitudinal or cross-sectional, which will be more relevant for a researcher to use?
So this is something, this is a question again, which will take me back to the 2 basic important questions. What is the objective of research and what are the variables of research? So you cannot decide sitting at one place कि नहीं अब मुझे ना longitudinal study करनी है, अब मुझे 1 subject design करनी है, नहीं, आपको research कौन सी करनी है और क्यों करनी है, एक बार उसका clarity आएगा. Like I gave you the example that when I was talking about that my friend who said कि नहीं मुझे मेरे पे study करना है, so we knew it is a single subject design. We knew it is going to be longitudinal क्योंकि जब से diagnose हुआ है और जब तक उसका treatment चला 3 साल तक, हमने वो 3 साल तक वो study किया. But वो same study हम cross sectional में नहीं कर सकते. हाँ, अगर मैं ये study करना चाहती हूँ कि generally people who are diagnosed with life-threatening diseases, how do they cope up? So this was another study which one of my students did as a part of a research, where she wanted to know that what are the coping mechanisms of people with life-threatening diseases. So what she did, she picked up 5 subjects who were diagnosed with cancer. She picked up 5 subjects with kidney failures, and she picked up 5 subjects with HIV positive. So HIV positive, which were already crossed to AIDS. So सिर्फ HIV positive नहीं थे, उनको AIDS हो गया था. So ये 5 स्टडी को 5 अलग अलग तरीके की लाइफ थ्रेटनिंग डिजीजेस के कोपिंग मैकेनिज्म्स को हमने स्टडी किया, एंड देन वी केम टू द जनरलाइजेशन दैट दिस इज हाउ द ओवरऑल ट्रेंड happens when people with life threatening diseases, this is what they take up as the coping mechanism. सो जब तक आपको ऑब्जेक्टिव नहीं पता आप क्या करना चाहते हैं, तब तक आप डिजाइन नहीं डिसाइड कर सकते। ऑब्जेक्टिव के बेसिस पे डिजाइन डिसाइड होती है, डिजाइन के बेसिस पे ऑब्जेक्टिव नहीं डिसाइड होता है।
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah. So what is the difference between longitudinal and cross-sectional design? So first of all is that longitudinal designs looked at variables repeatedly over a period of time, 1 साल तक, 6 महीने तक, and whatnot, right? Whereas cross-sectional studies are looked at only at particular point in time. Longitudinal studies observe the same sample, while cross-sectional studies observe different samples, as I told you, that वो हम अलग-अलग ग्रुप के ऊपर स्टडी करते हैं। लॉन्गिट्यूडनल स्टडी सेम ग्रुप के ऊपर होती है। Longitudinal studies observe change at both the group and individual level, whereas cross-sectional studies tries to look at the snapshot of specific point in time. Now, for example, if I am conducting for example, you want to see the impact of COVID on the mental health of school-going students between the age group of 12 to 14. अब इस केस में आप आज जब आप स्टडी करेंगे, ठीक है, तो आप जनरली कैसे स्टडी करना चाहेंगे? एनी क्विक आंसर somebody can give? Anyone? अगर आपको स्टडी करनी है तो कैसे डिजाइन करेंगे, क्या करना चाहेंगे आप, किसको लेंगे, क्या करेंगे? Just quickly think it over. Nobody is going to judge you, so give answers, please.
Ma'am, we can make a question as distributed in the particular schools or the classes of particular age group, or we can do we can ask for interviews process.
ठीक है, या तो आप इंटरव्यू लेंगे या तो आप क्वेश्चनर लेंगे, ठीक है। दोनों ही केसेस में आप सवाल किस तरीके के पूछेंगे, व्हाट काइंड ऑफ क्वेश्चंस यू वुड वांट टू आस्क?
मैम वहाँ पे सब थीम्स ऑफ मेंटल हेल्थ होंगे, जैसे उन्होंने क्या क्या अपने
आप मुझे एक सेंटेंस बता सिर्फ एक सेंटेंस बना के बताइए ना, एनी वन सेंटेंस, वन स्टेटमेंट और इंटरव्यू क्वेश्चन, व्हाटएवर. So now COVID is not existing, right? COVID चला गया, I'm sure बनारस में भी चला गया, है ना? नहीं है, एटलीस्ट न्यूज में तो नहीं है. Just on the lighter note, because students are physically going to the university or schools. Now, thank you so much for answering that question. Just taking a little forward for what she said, that you are going to ask question in retrospect, right? कि आपको कैसा लगता था जब आप घर बैठते थे, आपको ऑनलाइन क्लासेस में कैसा फील होता था, राइट? आप पेरेंट्स के साथ कैसे डील करते थे, कैमरा और माइक बंद करके कितना सोते थे, फॉर एग्जाम्पल, राइट? सो दिस इज वेयर यू आर आस्किंग पीपल इन रिट्रोस्पेक्ट. सो व्हेन वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट it will give you a snapshot of what did these students went through in retrospect during that particular period of time. They will tell you what happened then. So this is where when we talk about that, this will give you a snapshot of that उस time पे उनको कैसा feel होता था, उनका mental health कैसा था, ठीक है? So this is what I wanted you to understand कि ये क्रॉस सेक्शनल स्टडी में हो सकता है. लॉन्गिट्यूडनल स्टडी में जब से कोविड हुआ तब से लेकर के अगर लॉन्ग टर्म रिसर्च किया कि 2 साल के अंदर बिहेवियरल चेंजेस कैसे आए, लाइक बिकॉज आई एम डीलिंग विद लॉट ऑफ स्टूडेंट पॉपुलेशन, पेरेंट्स कम बैक टू मी एंड टेल मी कि पहले जितना मेरा बच्चा सुनता था अब सुनता नहीं, पहले पढ़ाई करता था अब नहीं करता है, अभी बाहर जाने को बोलो तो खेलने नहीं जाता है. So this are few observations parents are given based on what their own child is doing at home. This can become a part of single case study क्योंकि it is coming from the parents now, right? So this is about what I am talking about. So in longitudinal study we are studying the changes that are happening. Whereas in cross-sectional studies, those changes cannot be observed. And it only gives ki is samay kya what they are right now or at any given point in time. So, So another is that longitudinal studies tend to be expensive and time consuming, whereas cross-sectional studies are not expensive and do not take a lot of time. I will not say not expensive, I will say comparatively less expensive. And longitudinal study can study cause and effect, whereas it is not possible to see the cause-effect relationship in the cross-sectional study. क्योंकि मुझे नहीं पता है कि बच्चे का behavior आज ये खराब इसलिए हुआ है क्योंकि कोविड हुआ है. I cannot come to that conclusion as an outside member. But if the mother is saying so, she can say that because she has observed the child 2 years. I have not observed the child for 2 years, right? So in the nutshell, longitudinal study involves repeatedly the same subject, whereas it studies that involves collecting data from many different individuals at a specific point in time. Looks at variables repeatedly, looks at variables at a particular point. Observes the same sample, observe different samples. Observe changes at both group and individual level. Give a snapshot at a specific point in time. Tends to be expensive and time consuming, less expensive and less time consuming. Can study cause effect, cannot study cause and effect. So that is about the quick brief about longitudinal and cross-sectional studies. So the house is also open for the questions. You are welcome to ask questions. And I will pass on this PPT if you want to your organizers, and then they can share it.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I think it was full of knowledge and insight indeed from my end. Now questions for you all, from you all, if anybody wanted to ask any question.
But I was so happy that people were participating.
Yes,
yeah.
Ma'am. It was enough clear, I think, in between only.
Yeah, that's okay.
So, but anybody wanted to ask anything?
Yes, Bhavya. Boliye, Bhavya.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, what is mixed longitudinal study?
Okay, so mixed longitudinal study is where I am using the, first of all, let us understand what is the word mixed. Mixed basically means we are using quantitative and qualitative. So quantitative and qualitative when we are triangulating, so then we call it as mixed longitudinal study, where we are using the methods as both. We are using qualitative methods like interview, observation schedule, and we are also using questionnaires. For example, only interviewing may not give me answer. So I am also giving them a small questionnaire to fill up for me. So that is using quantitative and qualitative researches to come to the conclusion.
Okay, ma'am. Got it. Thank you, ma'am.
Anybody else?
No, ma'am.
Akshita wanted to ask a question.
Yeah. Can I do both longitudinal and cross-sectional study at the same time? It is a little very dicey question again, depending upon what you want to study. So number of times, if you want to study a particular thing for a little longer period of time, you may continue to study in longitudinal, but for cross-sectional, number of times we have to take a bigger data. It cannot be done on 1 or 2 individuals. So cross-sectional and longitudinal दोनों साथ में कई बार मतलब there is no need, because that is what is not the demand of your research design. So research design के हिसाब से आप choose करेंगे कि आपको कौन सा study करना है. So for example, you want to study at this point in time, what is the mental health of students going to the school. So आपने वो study कर लिया अभी, अब बाजू पे रख दिया. Generally, 150 बच्चों का या 200 बच्चों का, ठीक है, और उसके बाद उसमें से आपने कुछ उन्हीं में से कुछ 5 स्टूडेंट्स को पिक किया और नेक्स्ट 1 साल तक स्टडी किया, राइट, एंड देन you can talk. So but ये तो pre-post हुआ kind. I'm not very sure of if we can do both of them together. Why would someone like to do both with the limitations of time and resources? I think that is a little difficult to do. Yeah, we can do that for better result, but we have other methods to do that. Why only these two? So we may use some other method instead of longitudinal and cross-sectional. So longitudinal is all about taking it for a long time. Cross-sectional is abhi ka abhi karke khatam karna hai, to cross-sectional. So for example, if you all are master student, yes, Akshita.
I too have a question.
Yes.
Ma'am, I wanted to ask if, ma'am, like there are certain factors like Flynn effect, for instance, when talking about age, I mean a time period, कि समय के साथ, ma'am, I'm sorry for the background noise.
Sorry, नहीं बोलिए ना please.
हाँ, ma'am, तो ma'am, so there is this factor called Flynn effect, जिसमें intelligence increases with time, लोगों को ज़्यादा पता चल जाता है. So this will also impact a longitudinal research. And this will be one of the confounding variable, as if I may put it so. So इनको कैसे minimize करेंगे?
हाँ, so सबसे बड़ी चीज ये है कि उसको minimize क्यों करना है हमको, क्योंकि हम वही तो इफेक्ट देख रहे हैं ना, हम वही तो स्टडी में देख रहे हैं ना कि वो भी एक इफेक्ट कर रहा है. Why would I want to minimize that? I want to study that has also an impact on the development of the individual. Isn't it?
Ma'am, yes, ma'am. मतलब मेरा बस ये perspective था that minimization, because I'm not studying that particular factor per se. हो सकता है मेरी study intelligence से related ना हो. It is just a generalized development.
But impact तो होगा ना उसका.
हाँ जी.
Intelligence तो बढ़ेगा ही. तो now suppose for example if I want to say that intelligence तो बढ़ेगा ही, हम उसको चाहे पढ़ें चाहे नहीं पढ़ें, but in that case there will be lot of other factors though you are not studying, but because of the increase in the development, increase in the intelligence, my reasoning ability will change, the way I will make decisions will change. So cause effect relationship तो पता चलेगा ही उससे. If you are finding it confounding variable, but that is not only confounding variable, that is one of the very important cause effect. क्योंकि कई बार ऐसा होगा कि ओवरऑल रिसर्च करके जब आप अपने रिजल्ट्स लिखने बैठेंगी तब आपको जिसको आपने पढ़ा भी नहीं है वो इफेक्ट कर रहा है, तो आपको लिखना पड़ेगा कि हमने उसको मिनिमाइज तो नहीं किया था बट उसकी वजह से ये आया रिजल्ट. Because if you minimize, you cannot minimize that. You cannot make an individual stop developing. इसीलिए जब आपको इस तरीके का डिमांड है रिसर्च का, then generally we suggest that don't do longitudinal, go for cross section, क्योंकि that will give you now in point time what is happening in this point of time, where you can control intelligence, you can control age, you can control the other factors also, which you will not be able to control in longitudinal study. For example, longitudinal study में आपने middle socio-economic status लिया, इतने में उनके पिताजी का प्रमोशन हो गया, उनके पास पैसा आ गया, तो उसका इफेक्ट बच्चे पे तो आएगा ही ना.
Definitely, ma'am. Yes,
हाँ, तो ये सारे फैक्टर्स अगर लग रहे हैं आपको, तो then you may not study, you may not pick up this thing longitudinal. But again, longitudinal ही अगर पढ़ना है, so then towards the end you will have lot of findings that is because of that. So you don't need to control them.
So ma'am, the crux of it is, as a researcher, I can use it in my favor and not minimize it rather.
No.
Okay.
I will interestingly tell you that is done only when you are doing a cross-sectional research. Number of times you may not, there's this interesting type of variables. अगर आप लोगों ने variables पढ़े हैं, तो उसमें एक variable है जिसको हम study तो नहीं करते हैं और उसको minimize भी करते हैं, but overall effect तो दिखता है. So हम results लिखते समय बताते हैं कि हमने minimize तो किया था. For example, आपने sound को minimize किया, but जब आप मेमोरी टेस्ट कर रहे हैं, बाहर से बारात निकलने लगती है. You minimized all the noise elements, but अब suddenly बाहर से बारात निकल गई या बाजू के बिल्डिंग में आग लग गई. So that you could not control at that point, and neither you stopped the test. But results of the test clearly indicated certain thing because of that variable. So that is how you report. सबसे गलत चीज ये नहीं है कि तुमने मिनिमाइज किया या नहीं किया. ऑफ कोर्स मिनिमाइज करने के बाद उसका इफेक्ट हुआ या नहीं हुआ. सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट चीज ये है कि वो हमने रिपोर्ट किया या नहीं किया. We have to report that.
Yes, variable.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Anybody wanted to ask any more questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Rinku.
Yes, ma'am. Good evening, ma'am. Ma'am, I wanted to ask one more question. Ma'am, suppose as being a psychologist, so ma'am, since childhood, we all are observing some of the things around us. So ma'am, I have also observed some of the things which is related to industrial, means the employee which are working in corporate sector. So ma'am, although the person on I have observed, he is not no more. Ma'am, what we can do if we want to study about that person? Is there any possibility that we can proceed for the study?
Yeah, then it is a little historical research जैसा हो जाएगा थोड़ा सा. And उसको हम वो बोलते हैं ना ex post facto research. So where you will try to understand the individual from the diary he has written, the organizations he has worked, the people with whom he has closely interacted. So you can use all those people to do that research and data. You can do that.
Okay, ma'am. And ma'am, suppose that in addition to that, ma'am, if I found the same thing happening again and again with the same kind of individual related to particular some of the institutions, so ma'am, in that case, we can there is any thing that we can do as a research?
I would love if you give a little clear hint, because this is very unclear
Okay,
question.
ma'am. So, okay, ma'am. I'm saying, ma'am.
Give an example and say.
Okay, ma'am. I'm talking about, ma'am. I will tell you what exactly happens, ma'am. There was an individual. He was working in Bhel. So, ma'am, at that point, he was the GM of that institution. So, ma'am, due to some of the circumstances, I was very small at that point of time. So, I don't understand what happened after the retirement. So, ma'am, there was a drastic shift in the two phases of his life. So, I wanted to know. Yes, ma'am. I wanted to know because, ma'am, it is the common thing which I am seeing in all the individuals who are having the same kind of situation. So, is there anything that we can do? This is the question, ma'am.
We can conduct research and identify what are the specific variables that are making people behave before retirement, after retirement. So based on that, you can very clearly find the research and find the cause-effect relationship.
Okay, ma'am. So, ma'am, in that case, we have to do a cross-sectional study or longitudinal study?
No, it is not a longitudinal study. It will be a cross-sectional study. So you will study. So when you say longitudinal study, it is first of all presently, if you are longitudinal is when you're studying the same individual. Suppose if you pick up 5 people who are presently working and you study them, suppose उनका अभी 2 साल का रिटायरमेंट बाकी है, तो आप 2 साल तक उनके बिहेवियर को ऑब्जर्व करते हैं और बाद में रिटायरमेंट के बाद उनके बिहेवियर को ऑब्जर्व करते हैं. So that can be done. क्रॉस सेक्शनल है, जिनका रिटायरमेंट नहीं हुआ है उनके कुछ कॉमन वेरिएबल्स को स्टडी करिए और जिनका रिटायरमेंट हो गया उनके कॉमन वेरिएबल्स को स्टडी करिए एंड देन आइडेंटिफाई करिए कि व्हाट इज लीडिंग टू व्हाट.
Okay, ma'am, I got it. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Now anybody is left? The questions. So I think, ma'am, all the students are very satisfied. Although not students, but participants of this workshop are very satisfied. Thank you, ma'am, again.
Ma'am, I think there's one question in the chat box by Nancy.
Okay.
She has written, is individual difference affects outcome of cross-sectional research? Yes, yes, and yes. So what do we do for do that? उसके लिए आप लोगों ने एक चीज सीखा होगा, matching. Matching. So whenever you are picking up subjects for the cross-sectional research, you have to match. We also call this matched group design. So we match the subjects on socioeconomic status. Few, like one of my students that did the research on the confidence of students studying in Gujarati medium schools and English medium schools. ठीक है, अब हम उनका मैचिंग किया था, हमने एक तो जेंडर मैच किया था, दूसरा हमने मैच किया था उनका सोशियो इकोनॉमिक स्टेटस, तीसरा हमने मैच किया था एज, चौथा हमने मैच किया था इंटेलिजेंस. सो उनकी मैचिंग करके उनका कंपैरिजन किया था. सो मैचिंग के बिना यू कैन नॉट come to that. So in any kind of cross-sectional study or any study where you are using a big data, you have to have matched the subjects so that you can easily compare and contrast. Yeah.
Is it
I
clear?
think, yeah.
Yes.
I think the questions are done. I've answered all the questions in the chat. Yeah.
So thank you from my end, Richa's end, I think so. Richa ma'am, you wanted to say something?
Yes, ma'am. We are very thankful to you for our acceptance at this short notice. But I think it's a great thing that we actually met, although on a virtual platform. I think we are going to continue this relationship.
Yes, ma'am. Any day.
And definitely it was pleasure listening to you with all the life examples and I think students are very much satisfied because they're asking for email and all that. So I think
yes. I will pass on the email ID here, and because I'll pass on the PPT which you can send it to the students. So usme bhi mail ID hoga mera.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am. So
I have no problem. Yeah.
Now I'd like to call Riddhi Jain to deliver the vote of thanks. Riddhi?
Yes, ma'am. Good evening, everyone. The guest, Miss Priyanka, ma'am. It's my privilege to have been asked for proposing a vote of thanks. So, on the behalf of Vasant College of for Women and all the participants, RA Mahila Samaj College, I would like to thank the teacher a lot for their precious time for delivering such a valuable lecture. And it was actually very interactive because not only did we understand the concepts, we were able to also see how we can apply them in our research. So it was a very valuable session. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your time.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I would just like to quickly compliment the organizers and the students, specifically the participants, because I have been taking, of course, which we do not like taking virtual sessions, but when people don't interact, it always feels very monotonous that we are looking at the black screen and talking. But I was so amazed and happy that people were asking questions. Participants actually acted like participants. They were participating. Thank you so much for being a wonderful participant. And thank you, organizers, for giving me the opportunity to interact with such a wonderful crowd. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. We would really like if you share your email ID with us.
I did.
So
I did already.
Okay. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Yeah. And मैं mail कर देती हूँ वाला PPT. And then we can you can share with the participants if they want to.
Sure, ma'am. Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, ma'am. Good day, ma'am.
Yeah. Good day to you, ma'am. Bye, everyone. Bye, Richa, ma'am.
Bye, ma'am.